Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It is our pleasure from PAMLE this evening to bring you our 7th webinar series along with Eastern University. Our program tonight is labeled The Empowering Potential of Restorative Practices with guest speakers Jennifer Moyer, Jen Williams, and Judy Brough. Our first speaker is one of our regular co-hosts, Dr. Judy Brough, who has amazing expertise in middle level education, a place where she spent her entire career. She has been an educator at both Shippensburg University and Gettysburg College. She is one of the top experts on middle level history, having great knowledge in where the middle level philosophers come from and information on the founding fathers. Hello, Judy. Our second speaker is Jennifer Moyer, who currently works at Twin Valley Middle School as a health and physical educator and a student advocacy coordinator. She has worked in K-12 education for over 25 years and is a licensed trainer for the International Institute for Restorative Practices. Welcome, Jen. Our next guest speaker is Jen Williams, who currently works at Twin Valley Middle School as well as a school counselor and coordinates a restorative student-run peace room. She has worked in K-12 education for the past 18 years and has a master's in restorative practices from the International Institute for Restorative Practices. Welcome, Jen. We are so glad to have all of our guests who will have great things to share with us. This webinar will embrace the idea of student empowerment to facilitate and support a restorative setting, as well as show the connection between implementation of restorative practices and this we believe. I also wanted to say that once 8 o'clock comes around, our speakers will be joining us for another half hour to answer any questions you may have. You can use the Q&A feature. It's found by the chat if you have any questions, and we will definitely answer them towards the end of the presentation. This webinar will definitely leave everyone who joined us with amazing resources to take this information and use it in best practice. I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Judy Brough.
Thank you. Welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us. Just want to give you some idea, if we could go back to the objectives there just for a second. We want to make sure that there is a connection between all of the webinars we do and to the founders and the reasons that middle level education was founded to begin with. And tonight we're going to focus on my personal favorite founder, Conrad Tepfer, who was my mentor and who recently passed away. But all of what we do is trying to help educators to connect more with kids, and understanding that the connection is really how we get to get them to invest in what we do in the schools. So what some of the ideas of the founders, if we can go on to that next slide. I'm not going to go over each one of these, but they were all very adamant that we base whatever we do in middle level education, in education in general, on solid research. And we're lucky now that there's been quite a bit of really good research recently on the importance of relationships, which is why I'm really excited to have Jen here to let us know the kind of work that they're doing that really helps to connect with the kids, because it's one of the major characteristics of the kids. And we have to understand that the kids at the middle level are more diverse than at any other level. They have so many different needs, socially, emotionally, physically. You know, you've got the kids who, especially the boys who are 12, who look like leprechauns. You know, they're so little and undeveloped, and then the girls who look like I was never able to look like. You know, they're really quite something. So because of that diversity, we have to kind of get to know the kids more on a more personal level. Okay, next slide, please. So there's Conrad. As I say, he's my favorite. He just passed away in April. He had a photographic memory, which was scary at times being his student, because he could remember everything. But his major focus was that he was a great advocate of kids, to understand that they need to be respected. He was also, as I wrote there, he was a staunch advocate of social justice, the students' rights, authentic middle-level curriculum reform. And he also understood that middle-level kids have a sense of altruism, and that if we can tap into that altruism and make their lives in school meaningful and relevant, that they will then learn to trust us and learn to trust the educational system. This was a person who had no ego, and really was just in it to make sure that kids were getting the best experiences as they could. So on the next slide, I put in a couple of quotes that I have from Conrad. The first one is, as life outside the home takes on greater importance, the school becomes the major structured arena for transient social interaction. Middle-level school programs afford students with opportunities for social interaction with age mates, peers, and significant adults. And I want to point out that word transient. That was a word that was coined by another founder of middle-level education, Donald Eichhorn, who did the landmark boys medical study in Upper St. Clair, Pennsylvania. And he didn't want to call the kids young adolescents because they weren't all that young. You know, you have like grades 5 through 9. You don't want to call them early adolescents because some have already gone through adolescence, where some haven't started at all. So he came up with the word transient or transcendence to describe that it is a time of change, that they're starting to go through the developmental process, to question where they were, what they're going to become. I think it's a shame the word never caught on, because I find it to be much more of an accurate description. Conrad also said middle-level school programs should help transients learn social skills to communicate and to interact effectively, especially considering the wide developmental range among their age mates. So you've probably noticed, if you've done any work in middle-level classrooms, you will have kids who flock to people who are like them. So learning how to communicate in between the different cliques and groups of kids is an absolute essential tool for making it through middle-level school programs. And this last one, I think, just sums Conrad up. Middle-level students need to feel empowered and respected. That speaks for itself. So next slide, we said in one of the objectives is to make a connection for this we believe. If you haven't seen it already, there is a new edition of the Successful Middle School, This We Believe, that comes out of the Association for Middle-Level Education. I think it's like the 4th or 5th iteration of this. Conrad was on the committee that actually published the first iteration of This We Believe in 1982, when I was his grad assistant, and so I was doing a lot of research for him, because that's what grad students do. So it's interesting that because the founders were so interested in relying on current and reliable research, it's important to know that the different iterations of This We Believe have tried to keep up with that research, which I think is really important. But it's also interesting to note that so many of the connections to This We Believe are still the same as they were in 1982. So you can see that some of the connections are that middle-level education must be responsive, empowering, equitable. And then if you go on to the next slide, they talk about culture and community, that the school environment is welcoming, inclusive, and affirming. And that, if you look at that concept, then you'll see again that it's really reaffirming that relationships really are a bedrock of middle level education. And that all goes back to, next slide, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So, you know, making sure that physiological safety and security, love and belonging, self-esteem needs are met. The love and belonging, again, since kids are questioning their age mates and their peer groups and changing peer groups, that belonging again, and part of that is communicating with each other honestly. And I think that's the only way that any kind of bullying can really be staunched, is to get the kids to really get to know each other and feel like they belong there. So it's the whole idea of school as family. And I know there are a lot of slides that say that you should have Maslow before Bloom, that if you don't take care of Maslow's hierarchy, they're never going to get to the point where they're going to become lifelong learners. So relationships, next slide, please. Relationships before rigor, grace before grades, patience before programs, and love before lessons. So that whole idea of we're there to really help them. And the next slide gives you a really great resource that I hope you look up. It's search-institute.org. They're an organization that does meaningful long-term research about different age levels of kids, including middle-level kids. And their latest research is actually on developmental relationships. And if you go to their website, they offer lots of free materials for educators that you can download for free. And right now they're offering webinars, which I really highly recommend that you take advantage of, because it really is very good stuff. And the research is not only important, but it's good research. So I recommend them highly. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jen for her to start really working with us on restorative practices and how that is meaningful for kids and educators together. Jen?
Great, thank you, Judy, and thank you for taking us back and really taking a look at how it all started. Just listening to you and reading the slides kind of brought me back to when we first started at Twin Valley and Jen. We started with the This We Believe book, and I remember looking at it saying, wow, this is it. And it's been a long time since I've gone over those things, but it's also empowering to us to know that we're still carrying on all those things that Conrad Topher did. So we're going to try to give you a little taste of what restorative practices is tonight. I said before, Jen's journey, my journey started at Twin Valley over 15, 16 years ago. We first started with a student advocacy program. We realized the need for social and emotional learning for all of our students, very needy at this age. They need work on self-awareness, they need work on self-management, they need work on social awareness, relationships, decision-making. And one of the things that I think is important to note is if you're a middle school teacher, you're not really a math teacher, you're not really a social studies teacher, you're a middle level educator, and you're really educating that middle level kid. So you're doing all that extra stuff all the time. We use restorative practices in addition to our student advocacy program and our infusion of social and emotional learning into all of our classrooms. And tonight we'd like to really show you how we enhance that and how our student leaders help to make it grow in our school. Jen?
Yeah, thanks. It's really great to be here tonight and to share what we are very passionate about, and we know what works and has worked for us for so many years. If we want to look at the next slide, as Jen and I talked tonight, we are just hitting the tip of the iceberg of what restorative can bring into the middle level and any level actually. But as we talk tonight, I hope you can consider a couple things. The first is a shift your thinking. I think we all, as compassionate educators, have a framework and we are innately restorative, and shifting what we do and what we say might just be a little tiny shift. But considering what we're doing tonight and what we're sharing about language, it can be very powerful in your classroom. And then the second piece is grow your relationships. As we learned from Judy, it's all about relationships, especially in the middle level. If you don't have relationships, you can't repair that harm. And that's another foundation of the restorative concept. And then the last thing we want you to consider is allow empowerment to happen. We as adults sometimes have a hard time being vulnerable about shifting the power of our authority in classroom to a student. And I have to tell you, Jen and I are here to tell you that this works. Give the kids the tools and they will shine every single time. You have to give them support. And it's a fun way of working with kids, and they will do amazing things. So the next slide is about what the actual foundational concept of restorative practices. Before I get into that, IIRP, the International Institute for Restorative Practices, is an amazing organization. It's based out of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. They have their own graduate school and a very large worldwide professional development platform. It's not just about schools for them, but for my takeaway and for our purposes tonight, it's about implementing that into your own learning environment. But as a parent, I use this every single moment of my life, not just at school. So the concepts that you're going to be exposed to are going to be, I think, the most powerful piece of language and how to build relationships. So in order for us, like I said, to repair harm when it happens, there needs to be a relationship first. And for restorative practices to work, there's a concept of the fundamental hypothesis of restorative practices is that human beings are happier, more cooperative and productive, and more likely to make positive changes in their behavior when those in positions of authority do things with them, and that's the most powerful word, rather than to them or for them. And authority is okay in restorative practices. It's okay to have an authoritative stance, but also coming from it with working with the kids and not just a power differential is probably it's just how it works and develops. So the next slide, Jen will do this one.
So one of the things that Jen and I learned as we were going through learning about restorative practices is it's a shift and it's not really a big change. And you probably already are doing these things. It's just a matter of becoming self-aware and doing a little bit of work on yourself and really looking at yourself as a teacher. So if we look at the social discipline window, we're looking at two major factors. We're looking at control and support. So if you look at high control and low on support, that is mostly punitive. So I think about a teacher standing in front of a classroom and you're the one in charge and all the desks are in a row. That actually looks like a COVID classroom right now. So unfortunately, okay, we'll give this year. And then there's also where you're high on support, but low on control, which is more permissive. Then another spot is low both on control and support, which we call neglectful. And then finally, there's the third option where you're both high on control and support, and that's restorative. That's doing things with people. And this isn't something that's new. It's something that all your best teachers, all your mentors, all your coaches, they were all like that. They've always treated people like that and like with and doing things with them. And that's probably why they were your favorite people. It's also important to note that you will probably vary from square to square depending on your day, depending on what's going on. Sometimes it's super hard to be restorative all the time. We're human, we're going to make mistakes. And in this day and age with what's going on right now, sometimes you're going to hide in that neglectful corner. Sometimes you're going to be permissive because you just can't do it anymore. And it's okay. And we're just asking you to keep trying to shift back that way. Go ahead, Jen. You wanted to jump in?
Yeah, so I just always use the illustration of helping a child learn how to tie their shoes. You want them to tie their shoes. You don't want to use the Velcro anymore. And if you're going to tie it for them every single day, you're in the 2 or 4 box. You're going to just not teach them how to be independent. If you yell at them every time they have their shoes untied, you're going to just continue to shame them and get them upset, and then they won't want to try anymore. And if you just ignore them, they're not going to be able to develop the skill you want them to develop. So working with them, having just that moment of patience to sit, give them space, walk them through how to do it, because we know even with students with learning challenges, you're going to have to repeat things often and lovingly. And I know it's not always fun, and it can be a challenge, but having that at the end of the day, they're going to have their shoes tied. So just an illustration to help with that.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. And something else to think about is as you're taking a look at yourself as a teacher, there's no reason why you can't just shift in the moment. If you find yourself, being the sage on the stage and teaching too, there's no reason why you can't say, you know what, hold on, let's do this differently. Let me try this. And kids appreciate that. They really do. And that's how you learn and grow as a teacher too. And it's a good example and a good model for the kids to show them that you're also trying.
And also to interject here as well, it's not about, sometimes restorative gets a bad rap that kids don't get consequences, which is completely farce. If you give a child a consequence, it's okay. They need to know that that behavior was a non-negotiable. It's not okay to do. But if we just give them ISS without having a conversation about it and how they can rebuild that trust with you or the person they've harmed, that's the beauty of it. So many times we kick kids out of our classrooms because they've just hit that nerve one more time, and you're not giving them a chance, or you need to be able to be very explicit about, this is what you need to do in order to come back to our classroom community. And it has to be very clear to them. And in order for them to come back and know what they need to do.
Great. So let's look at those relationships. Let's look specifically at the relationships that you have with those challenging kids, the kids that pretty much set you off the minute they walk through that door. Let's think about how you are with them and possibly struggling to find that common ground and to create that relationship. There could be a roadblock. And what we're going to talk about next, what Jen is going to share with us, is what that roadblock is and reasons for the roadblocks.
Next slide. So as Tasha is forwarding the slide, one of the things, and I'll start to talk about it, we're going to look at a couple of videos here in a minute, but this, I would say, was the most profound piece of restorative practices I felt when I started learning it. And I have the lens of a counselor. I aim to understand student behavior, and I implement things in order to help them get better at whatever they're struggling with, right? So in the Compass of Shame, and this is by Nathanson, he said, shame is an interruption of a positive experience or affect. So think about when, like in the middle of this webinar, if you were the host and all of a sudden your internet went out in your house, how would you respond? And most of us have the skills to say, all right, I'm really upset. I'm going to get angry a little bit, but I'm going to move on because I have no control over it. But in a shame response, let's say students might act out in several different ways. They have maybe a lot of ACE scores. We talk about trauma now and how that affects them in the classroom. The more they have these responses, they get stuck, right? So one of the things that I do when I train students in restorative practices for the peace room, I make it fun by showing them Pixar videos, which are from YouTube. So I didn't steal them or anything, but they are 4 different illustrations on the different types of shame responses that might not be the healthiest. And once actually, as I learned it as a counselor, I thought, wow, this is a huge aha moment, because I don't have to take their behavior personally anymore, that they're yelling at me or that they're yelling at a colleague or whatever it is. I can see that something happened, and now I'm learning about what that behavior is right before that response so that I can find out what triggered the shame. So in the first clip, it's Despicable Me, and you will see that it's showing the attack others. Oh, I think the audio is not on. Let's try that again. So, and I can walk through it while Tasha's trying to make that work. So you can see Gru there with his kids. They're at a carnival and the kids are having a great time playing, and she hits the target. And the guy says, you lose.
With my own eyes.
And
let me explain
there you
something
go.
to you. You see how it's not knocked over?
Fluffy unicorn! He's so fluffy I'm gonna die!
All you gotta do to win it is knock down that little spaceship there. She hit that. I saw that with my own eyes. Let me explain something to you. You see how it's not knocked over? Okay, my turn. Knocked over!
So you can see that he attacked him because he was angry and they were having a great time. They had a positive affect and they lost when they thought they won. So, you know, we know students who, the other day I talked with a student who flipped a chair because one of his classmates said a comment behind his back and he had had enough. And so he was interrupted. He responded in that way. And that's attack others. So the next one is Elsa in Disney. Disney's Frozen. And this,
Close the gate.
take a look and then I'll.
What? Elsa,
Go ahead.
no, wait. Give me my glove. Elsa, please, please. I can't live like this anymore. Then leave. What did I ever do to you? Enough, Anna. No, why? Why do you shut me out? Why do you shut the world out? What are you so afraid of? I said enough!
Sorcery. You gave us something to is going on here.
So when she realized what she had done, this is withdrawal. She ran away, she hid. We know students who hide. They might spend many hours in their bedrooms right now during COVID, which is a big trigger to begin with. And some kids are withdrawing more and more. The next one is Toy Story, Mrs. Nesbit. You can go ahead.
No, Buzz Lightyear.
But yes, right, as Mrs. Nesbit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did it work? There we go.
I'm trying to get full screen. I'm so sorry.
Yep.
That's okay. And if you can't, it's okay.
Oh.
I know the toolbar is getting in the way. But so Mrs. Nesbit is something that Buzz is reacting to something and is intoxicated. And there's actually 2 places on the compass in here. So maybe you can pick up those 2 that happen. There we go. Oh.
Buzz, are you okay? Gone! Oh, God. My who's there? What happened to you? One minute you're defending the whole galaxy, and suddenly you find yourself sucking down Darjeeling with Korean tonic. Enough for today. Let's get you out of here, Buzz. Just you get. You see I'm sorry. You're right. I am just in the process. I can get through this.
So he's kind of knocking some sense into him.
Out of the window. Hat look good? Tell me the hat looked good. Apron is a bit much. Out the window? Buzz, you're a genius. Come on, this way. Years of academy training waste.
So he started out with avoidance, which sometimes we'll see students who start using drugs or alcohol to cope with things, and they're just avoiding things. They're also thrill seeking, and that's the piece of attacking self too. And they might just start. So anyway, so with Mrs. Nesbit, first of all, he was avoiding by being intoxicated and whatnot. And then he started talking like, I'm horrible, what did I do? And that is the attack self piece. So the last piece is from Finding Nemo. Let's see if we can get this one too. And this is actually just a repeat of one of the other ones.
Section clearly a headstrom.
No, K-flex.
Headstrom. K-flex! There I go. Little help over here.
I'll go deflate him.
So they were getting into a heated argument and he just started puffing out. So that is the attack self with a little bit of that withdrawal piece to it too. So think about those students that you struggle with, that maybe they're in this pattern of shame, as opposed to they're just having a bad day and they want to ruin your life, and they're just there to disrupt your class. There's probably more to it. So the next piece, the next slide, Jen's going to talk about that. Like, where do we go from here?
Okay, so we're starting to get to know our kids. We're creating those relationships. We're able to separate the deed from the doer. We're looking at the child, and if he's or she is acting out, we're like, okay, it's not me. Something's wrong. Something's wrong with it. With let's figure out what it is. There's practical ways that we can maximize positive behavior and minimize negative behavior. One thing I wanted to insert in here is you have to understand the adolescent brain. Their prefrontal cortex, where they're doing their decision making and all their reasoning, that is not mature. It won't be mature until well into their 20s. And maybe for some people, maybe even well after that. But they're not able to navigate decision making as well as we'd like them to. The emotional part of their brain is mature, and that's why we're getting the emotional outbursts. That's why we're getting the impulsive behavior. They literally can't help themselves. Middle school is a time where they're going to have some soft landings. We can give them tools to navigate their self-management and help them manage their emotions. And this is part of it. So on this restorative practices continuum, we're going to spend most of the time, 80% of the time, in the informal part, the affective statements and the affective questions. They're big words. Maybe you've never seen this before, but really you probably do this all the time. From left to right, moving to the right involves more people and planning and more structure. But let's look at the proactive stuff first. Let's look at the affective statements. These are the I statements. These are when you're looking at the kid and they're getting ready to blow, or they start doing something and you say, I see you're having a tough time today. I see that something's troubling you. I see something's wrong. Just that little interaction might be enough to stop it. Even if you say, how can I support you? What do you need right now? All these things are going to say to the kid, hey, that person cares. And maybe there's a way out of this instead of acting out.
Jen, can I give an example?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the other day, I have a student who just came back. We have a live streaming option and they can come back into the building. So the student was in class. The teacher emailed me, hey, they're not having a good day. Can you come down and talk with them? Sure. Came down, hoodie up, now they're masks, so you can't even see anything except their eyeballs. So I brought the student out into the hallway. I'm like, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. I said, oh, really? And then, but they weren't animated. They weren't the person I thought that they were. And then all of a sudden I started commenting on her shoes. Hey, those are really cool Vans. Where'd you get them? And then I said, once she kind of relaxed her body language, then I said, the teachers want to see you. Let's take off your hoodie and they want to see you present in their class. She took off her hoodie. She had beautiful highlights in her hair that were blue. Like, hey, my daughter wants to have blue hair. So we had this whole conversation about how to dye your hair. And it was all about affective statements. And then I was able to break the ice, and I found out she went back in the classroom. She didn't have her charger for her Chromebook. It was as simple as that, but she just kind of got into her shame response and hid from people and withdrew. And then just that little bit of conversation could get her out.
A similar situation with our librarian. He kept watching a group of 7th grade boys go into the bathroom before school starts, and causing some issues. And the teachers were all like, you got to get them out of there. They got to get to class. They're going to be late. And so he would go into the bathroom, say, guys, come on, let's go. You got to get to class. We're starting school. And so they kept doing it. And the teachers kept saying, they're causing trouble in there. They're doing this, that. So finally the librarian went in and said, you guys doing in here? And they're like, well, we're just talking. And he kind of noticed over a period of a week that they were just talking. And he said, so what if you guys meet in the library? You can sit in this like little section where I have all the chairs, and you can hang out in the library before you actually have to go back to the classroom, and I'll make sure it's okay with your teachers. Because it was important for those boys to be together and kind of have some connections. And the librarian saw that and realized, I don't have to write them up. I don't have to get all mean. I don't have to be, doing something punitive. And maybe I can help this situation. And it's been working fine. They come in, they have a little chat in the library with each other. Librarian says, hey, it's time to go. We're going to start school now. They leave and everything is great. It's just that little tiny tweak that you can do. Looking at repairing harm, and I think that might be a question some people have. As you're having these affective statements, these little impromptu conversations, there might be a time where you have to get the child to think about, how did this affect other people? And once the child gets to the point where they can understand that their actions have effects on other people, you can get them to talk about, well, how can we repair that? Sometimes kids don't understand that relationships have ruptures and repairs and ruptures and repairs all the time. Sometimes they think, no, I'm bad, I messed up, it's never going to get better. So something as simple as an apology, a heartfelt apology, can really go a long way. And for some kids, not all situations, but that's enough. And that's something that they can learn from. And there's kind of respect granted on both sides of that.
Can I share one thing?
Sure.
So that kid that got the chair in the class, having some questions, what happened? What were you thinking at the time? So I got to know that the kid behind him said a comment which made him upset, and he flipped the chair. I said, who did you affect? And he looked at me like, huh? And we know kids are egocentristic at this age, so they're still thinking and moving towards thinking outside of themselves. So that the middle school is the most powerful time for them to learn, how did their behavior affect other people or the community that they live or had that experience in. So this child, I was able to talk with them about how their teacher may have felt scared because they didn't know what he was going to do with the chair. He had no plans on hurting the teacher. He was like, what? I said, well, how do you feel? How do you think the teacher felt? So out of that, then, as Jen was saying, had a sincere apology, because I said, what do you think you need to help that teacher feel good about having you back in her classroom community? And he said, I guess I should apologize. Maybe. So we did. And it's those powerful conversations that you say, okay, that kid got it for that moment. Maybe not next week, but he got it then,
I think it's really important that we remember, how many times have we found ourselves in a situation where we're witnessing something, and then we get more information after, and then we kind of realized, oh, I was focusing so much on the negative, and I kind of lost that chance for the child to be heard and to have a voice. One thing that Jen and I and the rest of our faculty are finding is, if we give the students a voice and we give them a chance to tell their story, not only do we create that better relationship and we grow that relationship, but then they're also growing. And it's not a bad thing to give them a voice, and they're quick to pass that on.
Definitely.
So if we're moving forward, if we're moving more to the right on this continuum, we're going to involve some more structure in our meetings and some more people. Do you want to speak to that a little bit, Jen?
Yeah, so the circle piece is a great tool for both building community and repairing harm. It's really important. I know COVID gives some barriers to this, but I just found out from IARP that there's actually platforms on the virtual platforms that might be able to put people in circles. I thought that was really cool. I can't speak to what it is, but the technology is starting to notice that those structures need to be there. So circles can be as simple as check-ins. How are you guys doing? Use a talking piece. There are ways without touching a talking piece that you can get kids to do, like animated, let's pass a ball and they catch it, and then that's their turn. They hold on to that pretend ball and they can share about their day. There are sequential circles that go right around the corner and right around the circle, and you do a quick whip. One word that describes you today: chill, great, sad, whatever it is. Or you can also use it in a curriculum way. We're going to start talking about ancient Egypt. What's your background knowledge on it? What do you know about it? So that can be informative in that way. And then the classroom can start deepening their conversation on that topic. But in the repairing the harm, once you have done the work and built that relationship in your classroom community, then when something goes wrong, you can just say, hey, circle up, because the kids are used to it. You can say, this is what I found out when I was out yesterday, and how this this substitute felt, or this is what was reported to me. Anybody want to talk about it? And then sometimes the kids will be like, yep, so-and-so did this and it really upset me. Or that you can talk about how it affected the classroom that day. I was really stressed. We were trying to study for a test. I couldn't listen, whatever it is. So building that community is just, again, those relationships are that foundation. Then one thing that we do is a formal conference. So the peace room that I facilitate in non-COVID years is we are teaching children, well, and also let me go back to the circles. So we have the social emotional learning circles, Raider Pride. The kids are trained to come in as Raider reps and actually facilitate the conversations in a circle.
And that's our student advocacy program. Yep.
Right, the student advocacy program. So, and then the peacekeepers are trained to facilitate formal conferences as a discipline model of the building. So the office is aware of their work. They have a lot of extra training. So do the student advocacy piece as well. And they identify students that have peer conflicts. They meet with them individually to see if there's buy-in. There's a lot of time here that's used to really broaden the story of what happened. And then they work together to have an agreement, and then they check in later to see if that agreement worked. This formal conference piece is used in the justice system, criminal justice system across the whole world. It was based from Terry O'Connell in Australia, who used it with very high incident, like rape victims or murder victims. Their families could come with the offender and talk about how it affected them. And then there's sometimes this, you know, we got a little bit of peace even though our loved one was no longer with us, kind of thing. That's the extreme. But for our purposes, we have agreements that are kept in the office, and there's check-ins, and we don't have a lot of recidivism in the peace room. So we know it's working. So go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, I think we can move to the next slide. One of the things that we've noticed is the more time our faculty spends in growing the relationships, having the small conversations, and it's kind of expected in our building that if something happens in the classroom and they need to keep a kid for a minute to go over and really have a talk about what happened, that's how we roll. And then they just go late to the next class. There's not a problem with that next teacher, because we know in order for things to move forward and to help that child the most, that has to happen in the moment. The conversations have to happen in the moment because they're the most powerful. And it's also important that that teacher then follows up with that child again, you know, the next day, checking in, how you doing? Hey, better day today, right? Okay, great. The more time our faculty spends with the kids, the better things run in our building. The less discipline problems we have, and the less issues really everybody has in our building. This is our last slide here. Again, this stuff isn't new. Probably doing it already. Good teachers do it. It's a shift in thinking. We just want to shine the light on these things and say that yes, relationships are important. We threw a lot of new language out at everybody tonight. I promise you, if you start to use a different language, you will see different results, and you can try it out in your own home. It works.
It does. My kids are like, really, Mom, we have to do that thing again? I'm like,
yeah, mine do too, but I don't care because it works and it stops a lot of fights.
Well, you think about it as, you know, the big t-shirt you make the kids wear. I don't know if you've seen an illustration of that, or they have to sit on the step and put their arm around each other and sit there for 30 minutes, and then they figure it out. So I think there is, Tasha, one more, because we talked about all of these things, but it's about what we really do in our buildings. And we were trained in restorative. I was trained in restorative over, I don't know, 15, 18 years ago. And we're still using it today. Instead of us being the experts, we allow the kids to take the wings and fly with it. So the student leaders in the peace room are actually doing work that adults typically do in the office. And with the advocacy groups. So Jen has a leadership program that the kids are trained, and then they know how to have confidence coming in. They're prepared on how to facilitate conversation. They learn about what the specific questions to ask after they do an activity. So it's that social discipline window. You're doing it with them, because you're not just throwing out stuff to them. It is check-ins. You need to make sure that they don't have any vulnerability with it that they can't handle. We want the kids to be a little nervous, and that's natural. And they're moving through with it. And the empowering piece is that you see them grow before your eyes. I have a picture in my office that I get to look at every day of a girl who, she came in as a peacekeeper when I first trained her, and she was quiet, meek. She wouldn't even speak up. And at the end of the year, I have a picture of her with a fake microphone expressing how she loved the program and the things that she did to grow. So though that's one story of thousands that we can share of the empowering potential of what we've given our students and what they give us in return.
Yeah, this hasn't been without its, you know, its ups and downs. And when we were first turning power over to the kids and empowering them and letting them run with it, it was scary. And it was like, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm not really sure. Well, we got to try it. They surprised us. I mean, literally, I remember looking at Jen saying, oh my gosh, I can't even believe this. They're ready for it, especially in middle school, they're ready for it. So if we have any advice to give, it would be just go for it. Set up some structure for your kids, let them know you're with them all the way, check in with them, keep tabs on them. They can do it. They'll run with it.
Absolutely.
All right.
So we have our contact information. I know that there were people that couldn't join us in person tonight. And also for those who are here, reach out to us, email us. I think we have one more slide, Tasha, that shows what we can offer with professional development. Yeah. So Jen, do you want to say that a little bit?
Yeah, so just some things we've worked with at Twin Valley is building that classroom community, which kind of goes to that left side of the restorative practices continuum. We can talk a little bit about how we do run our student advocacy programs. We actually have a ropes course out at Twin Valley, a low ropes course that we work with. I've been working with some student teachers out at Kutztown University with some professional development offerings. So we would like to help in any way we can.
Mm-hmm. And then I can offer, I have a licensed training of the intro to restorative practices, the circles, and restorative conferencing. And I have done trainings as far as Miami, Florida, and Columbus, Ohio, working with students and educators on empowering the empowering processes of restorative practices. So we are very passionate about this, and we know that the middle level needs this more than anything. And if you need anything, ask us questions now or reach out to us via email. We're happy to answer them.
We've all decided that we'll stick around for a while. So if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A. We could also, if you just put it in the chat, I'd like to voice my question, then we can unmute you if you'd like to do it that way. But we hope that you take advantage of Jen and Jen's wonderful experiences and expertise. I know that one of the things that I was thinking of throughout your presentation is that middle level kids need time to reflect on their actions, and that very often we don't give time to that. So anything that is disciplinary ought to be looked at as a learning experience, not just as mere discipline. But that whole idea of sit down, think about what happened, how could we have prevented this? What do you think caused it? You might have the kids write it down or talk with someone else or talk with you or the counselor or whatever. But it's important, I think, which both Jen and Jen said, that, you know, this is about getting the kids to not be so impulsive, to think about what it is they've done and how it does affect not only themselves, but others, and understanding that they're going to screw up. And it's not that they're doing it on purpose. It's because they are young adolescents that's they're going through that experience. So it helps them not only become better students, but better people, you know, which is so important, because we don't want a lot of people who can pass a lot of tests, but are not kind, reflective human beings. And I think especially in such a climate as we have right now, with so many divisive things going on, that kids are going to have those triggers probably more now than during normal times. And even in normal times, there are a lot of them. So we have to, you know, going back to give them some grace, and give yourselves some grace too, because, you know, even though our myelination has taken place in our frontal lobes and can make decisions a little bit better, we also screw up. And there are times where we need to sit down and really think, have that reflection time with, how did my actions maybe affect the kids?
That is true. And a lot of educators, we struggle with being vulnerable in front of our students. And I feel like that's a very powerful experience when students know. Right now, I'm working with somebody and they have a medical experience that I share, and I'm able to connect with them on that level. And it's not something that is weird or anything like that, but it gave a connection with the parent too. Like, oh, Mrs. Williams knows about this and she's lived it. And it's very empowering. I mean, we keep saying that word, but it really is.
One of the things that I used to do as a teacher, for instance, when I taught 7th grade, if you can think back to what you looked like when you were in 7th grade, it probably wasn't pretty. And I have to tell you that every year when I was teaching either 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, the first day I would take in a picture of myself when I was in that particular grade. And the kids were not kind when they were looking at the picture saying, oh my gosh, what happened to you? Because I have to tell you too that at the time, I mean, I'm in my 70s, so a long time ago, we used to clean out orange juice cans and wrap them in aluminum foil to set our hair so we would get that nice bouffant kind of situation going. And my hair is very straight. I had my hair set in that in one night before picture day. This can twisted and I had a wing coming out in my school picture. And because my frontal lobe was not formed yet, I thought, well, the background of these pictures is a turquoise. So I went to the 5 and dime store and I bought nail polish that was turquoise. And I took every one of my school pictures and I painted over the wing of this, it coming out of my hair. And my kids would say, what is the matter with you? I mean, you weren't wearing any makeup. You had deep circles under your eyes. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, because I was sleeping in orange juice cans, so I wasn't getting any sleep. And they said, well, why did you cover that over with paint? And I said, at the time, I didn't think you could notice. But it was just that icebreaker right at the beginning, because you will notice that middle level kids are very concerned about how they look, how they appear to other people. And we all know that we're our own worst enemies about our own image, what we look like. So, helping them through that too, it really lends to a good sharing kind of thing. Because I don't know if you know this, but in the development, physical development, a kid's nose and ears grow faster than their cheekbones and forehead. And as a result, they look in the mirror and they're seeing this nose growing and think, I'm hideous. I'm going to have this huge nose. And, so if you talk to them about that, that these are normal physical characteristics. So you're going to be okay. So just having those discussions with the kids is, you learn so much about them and they learn about you, and and you set up that relationship and the trust.
Mm-hmm.
So does anybody have any questions?
Don't be shy. I don't know where everybody's from, but if anybody, it sounds like there's some pre-service students here that this might be completely new. But
Okay, well, if there's not, then Tasha, can you put on the slide about getting the credit for this?
Yes, yes. And I just wanted to say on behalf of PAMLE that we wanted to thank everyone for coming and especially to our guest speakers tonight. So thank you for that. And I will pull that slide up about the Act 48 credits. It's the last slide. Here we go.
And if you don't use Act 48, if you contact PAMLE, they can give you a letter, a certificate saying that you were here for this. If you need to just show that you did attend this, but you don't need the Act 48 credit.
And also wanted to add in that this is being recorded and will be uploaded to the PAMLE website in about a couple days, 1 or 2 days. So if anyone wants to share that or go back and check on these, it's a great presentation. And
we have these webinars on Wednesdays, the second Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. So we'll have a couple more. And at the end of this month, PAMLE has their annual conference that will be virtual. So if you go on to the PAMLE website, you can find registration there. Okay.